Hello, world. My name is Kevin Puricelli. I'm the executive for Miami YPN and YPN Global. Today might be the heaviest topic we ever cover in our podcast, Help Me YPN. Today is all about human trafficking awareness, and we are with our chairman of the board, Ines Hegedus-Garcia, and one of her initiatives is all about bringing awareness of human trafficking. So Ines, please tell us how this became one of your main initiatives for your year as chairman of the board.
Thank you for having me, Kevin and YPN. And yes, absolutely, a very heavy topic. For those of you that don't know how leadership starts, when you become president of a board, you are invited to Chicago to participate in a leadership retreat, per se. Last year, to my surprise, instead of all the speakers being about leadership, the incoming president invited Elizabeth Smart on stage. And to everyone's surprise, it was like not a dry eye in the audience. That's a name that is just renowned for being a survivor to human trafficking. So the premise became not so much, we have a tendency to avoid these heavy subjects to be in our neighborhoods, in our communities. So the conversation started about how many realtors we are, that there's power in numbers. I mean, we know that we're over 60,000 members in Miami alone, and we're everywhere. We're in every home. We're in every property. And it's not about, trying to be the hero by any means, but it's about being aware of what the signs are to recognize, because we, by being everywhere, have the ability to save lives. And I was just taken aback. I'm out of breath now just thinking about it. My heart actually changes when I think about how horrible this whole topic is. And again, super heavy, but the reality is that we can make a difference. Yes. So about to become president, I actually had a conversation with TK, who happened to be at that meeting as well. And I said, listen, I would love to make this one of my priorities. How do you feel about that? And she said, absolutely amazing. I think that there's definitely something to be said about putting the word out there. And then my surprise was, Kevin, when I started asking people their opinion, hey, listen, how do you feel about this initiative? They were dismissive, and I just couldn't believe it. And I said, wow, so we have a lot of work to do. When I spoke to Katherine about it, I was like, hey, Katherine, I need your help with YPN and Dania. And they're like, oh, we're on board. Like, let's do this. Let's see. And at the end of the day, I don't know if we're making a difference or not, but just by speaking about it, I think it does. And we have the ability to save lives. So with that said, thank you. Thank you for having me here on this podcast, because I think we'll continue to spread that word and see, what we can do for awareness. And again, thank you.
For sure. And it's, if we impact one life and keep it out of human trafficking, this is all worth it. And before we get into stats and some other things that you need to be aware of, we also have Esther. She has experience abroad with human trafficking. So Esther, tell us about your experience and everything, please.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you again for having me here. Okay, so in 2012 and in 2014, I had the opportunity to travel to South Asia, specifically in India, in a little town called Siliguri. And the team's, mission, right, was to provide aid to sex workers and those stuck in human trafficking. And we were able to not only provide aid, food, water, and clothing, but we were able to provide basic skills training, mental health training, abortion awareness, and AIDS awareness to these women that literally couldn't leave their room. Like, they were chained and stuck there, and this was their life. And for me, when you think about human trafficking, you think it's only something that happens in Europe, only something that happens in South Asia, but it happens here. But while we were there, it was almost something like out of the movie Taken. we did experience that. We had a safe house where we were able to rescue some of the women from the red light districts, and we had to negotiate with the madame. And the madame is a woman pimp, and we basically said, hey, listen, this girl, she was 27. She was sold by her parents at the age of 5 to be trafficked, and we basically had to negotiate and say, hey, listen, like, she's been so severely, like, physically abused and malnourished that she cannot bring you, you know, the money that you demand from her. And we were, by God's grace, able to save her and take her to the safe house. And it's so crazy even just talking about it, because I was there. I was in the brothel. I was in the sex trafficking community, and it was right before my very eyes. The women that cannot leave their room, like, they're literally chained to their bed to perform these acts, you know, for money, and they don't even make the money because they have to give it to the pimp or the madame. We did also, in 2014, we went for a follow-up trip, but we were able to visit just brothel communities. In third world countries, people need to make a living, and for some people, it's through sex. And we went to the brothel communities, teens as young as 15, 16, 17 years old, just making a living through their jobs. And for me, it's almost like, it's heart-wrenching to even hear that these things happen globally, but for us, that's just their way of survival, you know? So, I mean, that's just a glimpse of what I experienced for 2 weeks abroad in India.
And you know what, and I so appreciate your story,
Sure.
because that just puts it in perspective. But I think that's what we all imagine. We imagine this to only happen in third world countries. So that's where it slaps you in the face when you're thinking, not here, not in my neighborhood, not in my Miami. That doesn't happen here. So the reality is, when you start doing studies, it's like the Super Bowl brings this in. All these major events, which we have them all, Formula One, Super Bowl, all these things, this is when this crime just becomes worse and worse and worse. And I'd love for you to share, Katherine, so we did a presentation for Rock the Market, right?
Yeah.
And we had 5 minutes. So we said, how can we make this really powerful in 5 minutes? And I think we achieved our goal.
Yeah, it was amazing, the response from the public. And again, it goes back to, everyone thinks it doesn't happen in our own backyards. And thank you again for creating this initiative, because it's something that is never top of mind, or it's not even a thought in most people's minds down here. But it's one of those, if you start talking about it, if you start to bring awareness, your mind automatically starts creating, it starts focusing on that subject, and you might pick up on some of the signs and maybe potentially even save a life. And interesting.
It's like when you're buying a car, like when you find a model, and I hate to compare it to that, but you're like, oh, this model, and then all of a sudden you see it everywhere.
Yes.
So I think that's
Yes,
exactly it.
absolutely.
You know, we plant a seed in someone's head, and now you're going to be able to recognize the signs.
Absolutely. And like you said, we are the biggest association in the United States, over 50,000 members. So with that comes great responsibility. So why not bring this initiative and bring awareness? And it's that many more eyes in the community. Florida alone is number 3 in human trafficking. So for those who think that it doesn't happen here, gravely mistaken. And that's just statewide. Now in the state, Miami's number 1 in sex trafficking, and 70% of all humans are trafficked through airports, and we have one of the largest international airports down here. So it's very, very sad. And there was one stat that I think we got such a reaction out of the audience, where it was the children. Most children are trafficked while living at home and going to school, and a lot of times the parents aren't even aware.
That one blows my mind. So 12 to 14 years old are the most trafficked, and they go to school and live at home. I have to repeat that. I mean, 12 to 14-year-olds that are going to schools. Their teachers know they're there. Imagine. So, I know we've even mentioned this before. There's some industries that requires human trafficking awareness training. So, and I would love to see that go into our industry, because we are so out there. Whether or not that will happen will be something else, but we can try, right?
Of course.
Because this is all about having
Yeah,
the conversation
absolutely. Yeah.
and planting the seed.
Yes.
So before we get into some of the signs, do anybody else have any more stats that would be
I do.
beneficial? Please.
Yeah. So, in this journey of just raising awareness and building knowledge, and just being a light and being a voice, I follow the Polaris Project, and the Polaris Project is a survivor-centered movement where they provide resources for the community, resources for families, and they just provide a bunch of stats and myths relating to human trafficking. Oftentimes, when we think of human trafficking, again, we think it's a third world country thing. We think it's sex only related, but human trafficking is just pretty much using someone as an object for your own pleasure. It could be sex, it could be child labor, it could be physical abuse, it could be malnourishing, a child. It could be whatever. The list is really endless when it comes to human trafficking. But I pulled up some statistics from 2021. Okay, did you know that the top three trafficking that is reported comes from pornography, 8%. Okay, 8% comes from these Oriental massage parlors and also escort services. So here in Miami, everything is glamorized. Everything is lucrative. Everything just looks very fancy, very luxurious. But behind closed doors, trafficking is taking place. And like what Katherine said, Florida is, one of the top 3 states, but we also have California, we also have New York, we also have Chicago, where majority of this trafficking activity is taking place.
I wanted to share one stat that also caught our audience's attention then. So did you know that human trafficking is the fastest growing organized crime activity in the U.S.? Fastest. It's the second largest criminal industry in the world.
And to put money into perspective, it's $150 billion, not million, $150 billion industry. And it's soon to surpass drug trafficking, which is number 1.
25 million people are trafficked globally right now, at any moment throughout the world. That's 25 million.
I do want to share one more statistic from 2021, okay? You said 25 million. Is that globally or nationally?
I said globally.
So imagine 25 million globally. But think about how many of those are reported. It's very, very slim. And in 2021, there was a statistic that out of all the human trafficking reported, or all the survivors of human trafficking reported, only a little over 16,000 were reported. Okay, 16,000 people were reported trafficked in the United States in comparison to the 25 million globally.
Yeah, so I'm gonna stress one thing, because there needs to be a call to action, right? I mean, it's not about just us talking about it. And so the Florida Alliance for Human Trafficking, what is it called? The Florida to End Human Trafficking. It's the Florida Alliance to End Human Trafficking. The website is FloridaAllianceEndHT.com. Great website. Their outreach is phenomenal, and obviously that's who we have been doing a lot of work with, Miami Realtors. We actually did a seminar, a webinar, and opened in January. We did a movie screening where we went to see, what's the name of the movie? You guys need to help me out
Taken?
there.
No.
The Sound of
Oh.
Freedom.
Sound of Freedom.
Oh my
Yeah.
God, how could I forget that one? Not an eye, like a dry eye in the audience after that was done. Even the original gentleman that was there in person. But the most important part that I think we should get out of this is they have a 1 hour training. Anyone can do a 1 hour training. That 1 hour training helps you identify when you go into a home, you're going to go into a bedroom, you're showing a house, you see a kid's bedroom, and the kid's bedroom may not quite look right. It may not have the right toys or bedding like the rest of the home, or a lock outside of the door. There's just little things that you can discover. Realizing, again, that most victims do not even speak out. So what I wanted to mention about the Florida Alliance to End Human Trafficking is they have a lot of victims that now speak up. And a lot of the conversations, which are very similar to what Elizabeth Smart said on stage, is that she would ask herself, how come no one notices? How come no one sees my suffering? Imagine, she's in public. It's not like she's locked up and in chains like we imagine in India.
Right.
No. She's walking. Kids are going to school. So this 1 hour training exposes you to that child that says, how come no one is noticing what I'm going through? So that's what's important here. The call to action is take that 1 hour training. Go into the website and take that 1 hour training, and Kevin will make sure to share that.
For sure. It's on the screen right now.
Yeah.
So anyways, we obviously have a few signs. Is there any other ways or any other things that we should be looking out for to kind of get an idea whether somebody is being trafficked or not?
I do.
Please.
All right. So, again, it's lucrative here, but I've seen it. When you're ever at a traffic light and you're waiting and there's usually a woman, with a sign, help, I'm hungry. She's usually likely being trafficked. She's not speaking. She doesn't speak English, and she's parched. She's starving. She hasn't had any water. Usually those are the women that are being trafficked because, remember, it's a global epidemic. Women and children are being shipped in containers here, like through the airports, through, the railroads, through different forms, I guess, of transportation. And that, for one, someone that's malnourished, someone that, looks poor hygiene. Also, too, Ines, you mentioned the Super Bowl, right? And F1 and all of these big, large events here in Miami. It's a hub for trafficking. And I've seen it firsthand where, there's usually an older man with a younger girl, likely in her teens, and she's quiet. She can't talk. She can't look. She can't do anything. And, it's when we realize, notice the signs, because we could be ignorant and we could just look the other way. But it's when we have a specific kind of awareness, when we know that trafficking is taking place, that you go up to, a cop, or you go up to someone of authority and say, hey, listen, there's suspicious activity here. And oftentimes it's trafficking, So it's usually that, where they're really quiet, they can't speak, they can't look the other way. They're very scared for their lives, You have an older man or an older woman around that teenager, that child. But then also you have it here, out at the traffic lights, really.
And then, and like you said, it's keeping your eyes open. And if something doesn't seem right, let someone know. One of our board members, her brother is a police officer. And he said he was out one day and he saw this little girl just walking. It looked like she was walking like in a neighborhood towards a house, but the first red flag is it was 10 in the morning. Why is she not in school? It was a weekday. So he tries to go up to her, and she immediately tells him, I can't talk to you. You're bad. You're bad. Because of the cop uniform, because they had already instilled that in her. And, they have their tactics that he tries to warm up to her. He gets her to talk, what's your name? Here, this, and that. And then she did something where she ended up raising her palm, and he noticed the barcode on her forearm. So it's things that a lot of times these things are happening right in front of you. You're so busy with your day, you don't even notice. And luckily, an officer was the one that caught that. But if it would have been anyone else, any of us driving by at any point in time before we started this awareness, would anybody have noticed? Would anybody have called the police officer? So those are the questions you really have to ask.
So talking about signs, branding, scars, very particular scars, serious dental issues is another one, disoriented, confused, infections, so malnourished that you mentioned, sometimes drug addiction, that's how they keep them hooked, sleep deprivation. And then the verbal traits are responses if it's coached, just like the little girl when saw a police officer and said, you're bad, allows someone else to speak for them. So they have no voice. They're fearful, there's anxiety, they could be paranoid. They're reluctant to discuss any inquiries that you ask them. So, you may interpret these to be like a shy kid, but the reality is that if you look a little further, you realize that there may be more to it. Now, what do? We see it.
Yeah.
Right.
What do we do? So there is the call to action. So there's a couple of numbers. There's a number in Florida that's 1-855-FLA-SAFE is one of the numbers. And then there's also a national human trafficking hotline, and that number shared right now is 1-888-373-7888. So it's as easy as just calling these hotlines and just reporting. It could be if you see a police officer nearby and letting them know, or doing both. That's the point of this all. But at the end of the day, don't just let it go. We all have an instinct. If you feel something's off, just report it. What's the worst that can happen? You were wrong?
Right, exactly. And also, too, touching up on that, in building an awareness, that could be your sister, that could be your brother, that could be your little cousin, that could be your daughter, that could be your son. So it's connecting, on a human level, that could be someone you know.
And it's up to us to keep an eye out, because it's not anything that's going to go away anytime soon. It's a business. It's a very profitable business, and what's making it so lucrative, it's compared to drugs, which is number one right now. A drug takes money to create, get to the destinations, but once you consume it, it's done. And you have to create it again. A human body gets used over and over and over, and that's why it's so profitable, and it keeps growing. And if we don't do anything about it, I don't even want to think about it.
So we've talked about here in the United States, but Esther, if this is seen overseas, do you have any advice?
Well, be a voice, right? Be a light, and partner up with global organizations. There's the A21 campaign by Christine Kane. She does global outreach. I daily talk to the nationals in India, and they daily update me. They're always in the red light districts, letting me know about the women that are tied up in these brothel communities. And I'm pretty much just raising awareness, because one of the main concerns that I had, or as far as conversations with the women in the brothel, they told me that although that they have been in this cycle of sex trafficking, of human trafficking, although they're not educated, they know well that this industry is not safe or healthy for their own children. So because they can't make money, they cannot send their children off to boarding schools. and now it's a generational cycle. So, you know, the nationals are doing what they can financially to send these children off to boarding schools away from the red light districts. So, you know, whatever you can do on a local level, try to do it on a global level, because this is the next generation, you know? So if we don't do anything now, how are we going to find change, you know?
And thank you, Ines, for putting Miami Realtors in the forefront to be that change. It really means a lot to the organization, and I hope we really do at least change one person's life. Guys, you have the information. Ines, one more time, just to ride this home before we end this podcast, what can people do to educate themselves more? I know you talked about the class. Let's talk about where what people can do to really be the change that we need.
Listen, awareness starts with yourself, you know, and admitting that the world is not perfect and we have the ability to make a difference. And you know, it's self-awareness that there is a problem. And if we all admit that there is a problem and we have, you know, the ability to change one single life, which is at the end, that's what matters, you know, save one life. And we've talked about different things. It's not just women. There's kids, there's boys, there's labor trafficking here under our noses, you know, and these people look absolutely and perfectly normal to us. So let's do something, you know, let's not just talk about it. Let's do something about it. Just open your eyes. I challenge you guys to, you know, find out what it is, dig a little bit deeper, find out what those signs are, and make a difference.
Yeah, here are the numbers one more time. Please write these down. Put them in your phone if you have to. This is so important. Any final thoughts before we go?
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah,
truly.
Always. Anything that Miami YPN and Miami Realtors can do to make a difference, you know we're here. Absolutely.
Well, thank you for having us.
Thank you.
No, and thank you for listening if you're listening to this.
Thank you.
If I find my way home, yeah. Wouldn't it be crazy? Oh, don't you still amaze me? Wouldn't it be crazy? Oh, don't you still amaze me? Wouldn't it be crazy? Oh, don't you still amaze me? Wouldn't it be crazy? Oh, don't you still amaze me? If I find my way home, yeah. If I find my way home, yeah. Wouldn't it be crazy? Oh, don't you still amaze me? Wouldn't it be crazy? Oh, don't you still amaze me? Wouldn't it be crazy? Oh, don't you still amaze me? Wouldn't it be crazy? Oh, don't you still